Alright, so today we have geometry. Good geometry. First thing we're going to do is go over the angle and line relationships. So the first type of angle you can have is a vertical angle. Alright? Vertical angles. What that means is that these angles are opposites of each other. They're opposites of each other, which means you have to cross the vertex in order to get to the other angle. Alright? Now, which means they are congruent. If two angles are congruent, they are equal to each other. So here you have angle 1, 2, 3, and 4. Alright, so here, if you start at angle 1, in order to get to angle 2, you have to cross this vertex in the middle. Once you cross that vertex to get to this next angle 2, that is one way to check to make sure that these angles are vertical. Alright, so here you have angles 1 and angles 2 that are vertical. Also, you have angles 3 and 4 that are vertical. As stated, so once you know that they are vertical, the next thing to understand is that they equal each other. So if angle 1 is 45 degrees, then that means angle 2 is also 45 degrees. If angle 3 is 20 degrees, that means angle 4 is also 20 degrees. The next type of angles you have is adjacent angles. Adjacent angles. Adjacent angles just simply mean that they are side by side, which means they share a common side. So here, if we look at the diagram, you have angles 1, 2, 3, and 4 again. But this time we're going to look for adjacent angles. If they are side by side, if I'm looking at angle 1, there are two angles that are side by side. That is angle 3 and angle 4. If I'm looking at angle 4, the two angles that are side by side are angle 1 and angle 2. If I'm looking at angle 2, the two angles that are side by side are angle 4 and angle 3. So in order for angles to be adjacent, they have to be side by side or share a common side. So if we're looking at angles 2 and angles 3, they share this side here. Alright, so for vertical angles, you have to cross the vertex. And for adjacent angles, they have to share a common side. Complementary angles. The sum of the angles equal 90 degrees. So clearly we can see here that these two angles equal 90 degrees because we see the right angle box in the corner. So if angle 7 is, let's say, 30 degrees, then if they both equal 90, angle 8 must be 60. Alright, so you will notice that I have an equation here. Angle 7 plus angle 8 equals 90 degrees. So when we get ready to work problems out that are set up just like this, we want to set up this same equation before we start working any problems. You have angle 1 or 7 plus angle 2, or in this case 8, equals 90 degrees. Supplementary angles. The sum of the angles equal 180 degrees. So same concept as complementary, except instead of them equaling 90 degrees, they're going to equal 180 degrees. So we add these two angles here, angle 9 and angle 10, you'll see that it will give you a straight line, which is the same thing as 180 degrees. Alright, so real quick overview, we have 4 different types of angles. Vertical angles, alright, they're opposites. You should also know that they are equal to each other. Adjacent angles, they are side by side, which means they share a common side. Complementary angles, a sum equals 90. Then you have supplementary angles, the sum equals 180. A good way to remember that is that you have complementary starts with C, supplementary starts with an S. Complementary, then you have 90 then you have 180. So C comes before S, 90 comes before 180. So that's how you write it. C comes before S, 90 comes before 180. So complementary must be 90 degrees, and supplementary must mean that it is 180 degrees. Just a little cool way to remember that. So we have our examples here. Angles A and S are complementary. If the measure of angle A is 65.3 degrees, what is the measure of angle S? So the first thing that we need to understand is that angle S and A and S are complementary. So the first thing that should go through your head is, what does complementary means? Well, that means that the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle S must equal 90 degrees. So now we have our equation set up just like the one we saw in the example, in the definition. Next thing will be to sub in what we know. We know the measure of angle A is 65.3 degrees. We do not know the measure of angle S. That's what we're trying to figure out. So we're just going to bring it down. And it equals 90 degrees. Now we need to get the measure of angle S on the side by itself. This is the same thing as it being a variable. So we want to keep it on the side by itself. So we need to subtract both sides by 65.3 degrees. On both sides of the equal sign. It's very important to remember to do that step. So when we do 90 minus 65.3, we get that the angle is 24.7 degrees. Let's cancel that. Now to check to make sure, we can always plug in our answer. So that means angle A and angle S must equals 90 degrees when we are adding them together. So if we add our answer, 24 plus 24.7, to the angle of measure A, 65.3, we do get 90 degrees. So that's how we know that our answer is correct. Now you can try number 2. Try number 2. Pay attention to what type of angles they are. It's a little different from example 1, but it's the same concept. Try number 2. All right, so for number 2, angles B and K are supplementary. If the measure of angle B equals 121.6 degrees, what is the measure of angle K? First things first, understand what we are doing. We are looking for angle K. That's one thing. And number 2, these angles are supplementary. So I need to write what I know. Angles B, so that's the measure of angle B, and so I need to add the measure of angle K. R, which means equal sign, supplementary, that means 180 degrees. So angles B and K are supplementary, 180 degrees. Fortunate enough for this problem, we would know that they cannot equal 90 because one angle is already greater than 90 degrees. So sub in what I know. I know the measure of angle B, that is 121.6 degrees. I do not know the measure of angle K. I do know they both equal 180 degrees. So just as the top, I need to subtract the measure of angle B on both sides, which is 121.6 degrees. This cancels out. I'm left with the measure of angle K equals, let's see, 180 minus 121.6, 58.4 degrees. Make sure we put that degree symbol. I'm left with 58.4. If I need to check, I know angles B and K added together should equal 180. So if I add 58.4 and 121.6 degrees, I should get 180. And in fact, I do. So now we are going to classify angles and then give the value of x. Classify angles. Classify. All right. Classify means to identify, name them. All right. So we're looking at 146 degrees and x. When looking at this picture, if I add these two together, I see a straight line, which means 180 degrees. So I then know that these angles are supplementary. I also know that they are adjacent because they share a common side. These are the two things that I know. So, both of these angles added together must equal 180. So I need to write that. X plus 146 degrees must equal 180. It's just that like we did here on examples 1 and 2, except we don't have a name for our angle, so we just put what the angle measures were. Now I have one-step equation. I'm going to subtract 146 on both sides. This cancels out. I'm left with x equals 180 minus 146. That should give me 34 degrees. So I have classified the angles and I gave the value for angle x, the value of x, which was 34 degrees. Now I want you to take this time and try number 4, and if you can, number 5 as well. You can pause at this time. So we have number 4, 62.9 degrees, and then we have x degrees. One thing that allows me to notice that this is complementary because I see the right angle box. So I know that these are this angle is complementary. Excuse me. And they are adjacent. Complementary means when I add two angles, the sum is 90 degrees. So when I add x plus 62.9, I should get 90 degrees. So one-step equation, I need to subtract 62.9 on both sides. This cancels out because it is a zero pair. It equals 0. So I do not need to write x plus 0. I can just write x. equals 90 minus 90 degrees minus 62.9 degrees. And we get 27.1 degrees. One more problem. Number 5. When looking at these, they are not attached. However, if I still were to combine the measures of these angles, this will form a straight line. So these are supplementary, supplementary. They equal 180 degrees. Remember, C comes before S, 90 comes before 180. They also are, well, these are not adjacent because they do not share a common side, okay? They have their own different sides. Now, x plus 105 degrees should equal 180 degrees. Subtract 105 on both sides. This cancels out. X should equal 75 degrees. Once again, if I wanted to check all of these, I can add 34 degrees plus 146. I should get 180. If I add 27.1 degrees to 62.9 degrees, I should get 90. And lastly, if I add 75 degrees to 105 degrees, I should get 180 because it is supplementary. So these are your angles.